All right, my name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Morgan Beck. We're at Johan Vineyards. It's Monday, July 1st, 2019. Thanks so much for joining us today, Morgan. Really appreciate this.
Thanks for coming.
We'll start you off by asking why wine?
Why wine? Yeah, well, I guess to start with, if you would have asked me or told me that I would be a winemaker in the Willamette Valley when I graduated college, I probably would have laughed. I grew up in Colorado, and I guess my parents were both involved in horticulture. My dad owned a landscape company, and I worked summers with him, and then my mom was a horticultural therapist at a hospital, spinal cord and brain injury hospital, and I spent a lot of time volunteering with her, working in the gardens, in the therapy gardens, so always kind of had a green thumb, and that was definitely part of my upbringing. Mm-hmm. I went to school at University of Colorado at Boulder, and I studied finance and international business. Graduated in 2008, right when the market crashed, and somehow found a finance job right out of school. And I liked it, I enjoyed it, but I ended up taking a little sabbatical, if you will, and went up to Vail, Colorado, to be a ski bum for a few years. And as you do when you work in the ski industry, I guess you ski all day and then you got to figure out how to make your money at night, and worked in restaurants. And that is where I discovered wine. I remember the first time I actually had a sip or tried the wine that was like, oh my gosh, this is good. Mm-hmm. This isn't just what I was familiar with as wine before. Mm-hmm. Working at a restaurant, and a gentleman, it was actually an Oregon Pinot Noir, offered me a sip of the wine, and I just remember being really moved by it. Mm-hmm. From that point, started asking a lot of questions, and kind of worked my way through a couple different restaurants up in Vail area, and ended up finding a somm at one of the restaurants who became a mentor of mine. Allowed me to sit in on some of the distributor tastings and different tastings throughout the days. And then they had a really deep inventory, so I ended up using my finance spreadsheet experience and helping organize, which was really interesting. Mm-hmm. Just kept looking up all of these wines and getting to taste more wines from around the world. From there, I guess that was my main service side of things. I find it really interesting because I think a lot of the winemakers here move from service side and into production or viticulture, and it's always, for me, interesting to hear how that happened. In my case, I actually ended up heading to South America for, originally the plan was to ski in Argentina, and I actually ended up getting injured and having some knee surgeries, and when I got better, it was summer and I wasn't allowed to ski, so I still went and traveled South America for a while, and then landed back in Buenos Aires, really just wanting to learn the language and learn Spanish, feeling like in order to do that, you really need to immerse yourself in a culture and a place. So I got a job at a little wine bar, and they put me in wine school so that I could do wine tastings in English for the tourists that came through this wine bar on their way out to whatever wine country that they were visiting. It was really interesting, met some really cool people. Actually, a couple of Oregon winemakers came through. And when I finished the introductory class, the school that I was going to was just starting a year-long enology and viticulture certificate program. So I enrolled in that, and I lived in a big city and learned about the science of winemaking and viticulture in Spanish, which was, interesting. And the more I learned about it, the more I felt like I really just needed to try it. You learn so much in a book, and I was pretty far away from wine country, so the hands-on portion was not tangible. And I finished up school, and then it just happened to be, I think it was June, so harvest in the United States was coming up soon, and I was pretty ready to get back to the States. Applied for so many internships. I'll say that it's hard, and I feel for when I receive internship requests. It's hard to start as a green intern with no winemaking experience and no, accredited degree from a university. So I cast the net wide and landed actually what initially, I had this thought in my head that you'd work at an estate vineyard and winery and get to go to this magical place every day and make wine. And I ended up at a custom crush facility in a warehouse district in Sonoma. And it was actually the most amazing first winemaking experience, because I had the opportunity to see a number of different winemakers, a number of different varieties and winemaking styles. And it was a really special first experience. I think I wouldn't trade that for the world. I fell in love with the cellar. I think by week 2, it's this is amazing. I feel like you either love it or hate it during harvest, right? And from there, I also really was drawn to Pinot Noir. One of the gentlemen that I worked with down there was, he made a lot of really beautiful Pinot from Sonoma coast, and I was intrigued immediately. From there I went to New Zealand and had my first biodynamic winemaking experience down in central Otago, again with Pinot Noir. I then came to Oregon, because Oregon does Pinot, I heard. And had a really amazing experience up here in Oregon. And then went to Chile and worked in Casablanca, again with Pinot focus. I landed back in the Bay Area and worked at a little urban winery in Berkeley. And from there I realized that the style of winemaking that I was becoming more drawn to, the vineyard was a really, really important thing to learn and understand. And working at an urban winery felt very far away from that. So I decided to dive back into the other side of viticulture and get some experience on that side of things. Worked with an organic and biodynamic vineyard management company based out of Sonoma, and that was an incredible experience to see. And when I finished that, I realized, there's not much Pinot in Sonoma and it doesn't do really well here. So now I have this viticulture experience. I want to go back to Oregon, and I had always been drawn to Oregon and thought about Oregon after my first harvest up here. So yeah, I guess that's a really long-winded why wine, but to me, finding the fact that you can grow something and it's so dependent on this seasonal change, it encapsulates an entire year of everything that happens to it into these grapes, and then we are able to make and help guide, I guess, an artistic expression of the land for people to enjoy and have an experience with. I think finding out how, compelling that can be was really what kept me interested. And it's just always changing, so you never get bored.
Tell me about your travels a little bit. Were there specific things you pulled from different parts of the world that you've kind of brought into your reign of knowledge now? What were the experiences? What do you keep with you from your experiences in New Zealand and Chile and Argentina?
Yeah. New Zealand, I learned about temperatures. I remember having that experience working in Celsius and seeing the 1 degree difference was like a degree difference in Fahrenheit, and really learning about extraction of winemaking at different temperatures. I think that was really a big piece of that experience for me. Making wine in Central Otago is really seasonally dependent. There are some really good years, and then there are some years that it struggles to get ripe. Tannin management is a thing there, but it was a really interesting site that I worked with. It's a Biodynamic from inception. I guess they farmed the land for many years, Biodynamic, prior to planting grapes, and they were really interested in figuring out the expression of each block and the chemistry of each block. So we literally ran full panel, or not full panels, but bricks PHTA on every single bin of fruit that came in, and it seemed totally bizarre when we did it. This was a lot of work on every picking bin of fruit, but at the end of harvest, we were able to map the chemistry of Pinot Noir across the entire site. And that was a really great experience at that point in my winemaking career, because I didn't have the foundational knowledge of, a 4-year degree. So I had, basic chemistry of winemaking, and that really helped me understand those relationships. I think in Chile, I learned how to fix things because when things break in Chile, you don't just go buy another one, you fix it, and that's invaluable because winemaking is very expensive and the tools that we use are very expensive. So yeah, it was learning how to make beautiful wine with, we did have a nice press and nice things, but just all the little stuff of how a cellar works. There was not anyone to come out and service your pressure washer when it breaks. It's like, pull out the manual, figure it out. And the other big thing about Chile for me was learning how to work and manage people that are there for harvest that don't necessarily care about wine. Because of the schedules and the you come into work at 7 a.m. and everyone else was really excited to go home at like 4:30. I'm like, we're in the middle of pump overs and we still have a whole bunch to go. Like, how do you explain to someone who's just used to working in factories that this is a time dependent situation? And I remember at one point everyone left and I stayed and finished the entire evening of punch down and pump over by myself, and I came in and I was doing the morning ones before anyone else got there, and they were super surprised that I did that, and they never left me again. They just stuck it out. So learning how to communicate the kind of urgency of what needs to be done at what time during harvest was Chile. Oregon was my first experience to really feel the community vibe I loved, and that's what drew me back here. I love that the industry here is a whole. It doesn't feel as, I mean, maybe just California is more saturated, and therefore, you know, you have to be a little bit more independently unique to do well. But there's just something about Oregon, or maybe it's the people that the Oregon wine industry attracts. But I felt home here. So, yeah. I know.
You mentioned your first real kind of transformative wine taste being Oregon Pinot Noir, and then being drawn to Pinot Noir after that. What is it about Pinot Noir to you that makes it so interesting, or makes you want to do it for a living?
Well, I think to start with, prior to that, I'd probably just had some mainly big reds. I don't think I had a wine made in balance, to say first. I love that Pinot Noir has the complexity and depth, but maintains balance and elegance when done well. The more I learned about it, I think all of us that work with it because it is difficult and it continuously challenges us. It's hard to grow. It's finicky in the cellar if things aren't perfect. I think it demands a lot from you in terms of attention. And if you just listen, it's just really intriguing, I think, in general. I mean, there's a lot of really fun grape varieties, and we work with a lot of them here at Johan. But Pinot Noir is so expressive. There's so many different expressions of the grape through different selections and clonal material, for sure. And I think it's really transparent as well. It can really show the difference of a site.
So tell me a little about you talked about kind of, as you were developing your winemaking, you realized the importance of the vineyard. And you've worked with Biodynamic, you've worked with organic. Tell me a little bit about your vineyard philosophy and what it is you strive for in grapes you're overseeing, and what it is you look for in grapes that maybe you're sourcing.
I think a big thing here in Oregon that I feel really fortunate to be here at Johan Vineyards is the importance of a site being fitted to the grape varieties that you're growing. I know we have a lot of Pinot Noir in this valley, and I think I don't know if the last 5 years of warmer climate is to stay, but I have an inkling. And I think to figure out how to have Pinot Noir growing and continue to achieve balance without manipulation in the cellar is really important. In terms of the vineyard, you know, we do a lot here to focus on the diversity of the site. We are not just growing grapes here. There's a lot of room and space for diverse cover crops, and all of that contributes to the complexity of the wine, I think, in the end.
Sure.
Yeah.
So speaking of Johan, how did you end up here?
Yeah. I worked a harvest after coming up from California. I worked a harvest with a gentleman who buys a good amount of fruit from the site, and saw Johan Fermentations as well as a number of other sites in the cellar, and there was something about those fermentations that were wildly different. Super aromatic, just, I don't know, everything was native yeast fermentation in the cellar, but the pace of ferment from the Johan grapes were really kind of just perfect. Like, things didn't go wild and, need your attention. So I was super intrigued, and actually that winemaker went and grabbed a couple of Johan bottles and blinded us on those bottles in the middle of harvest. And I remember tasting the Chardonnay, our Wisdom Chardonnay, and thinking, there's no way this is from the United States. This is beautiful and balanced and delicious, and just tasted very old world to me. And then the Pinot Noir was just unlike anything I tasted prior as well. And he pulled the bottles out of the bag, and sure enough, they were from Johan Vineyards, the same place that all these magical smelling fermentations were from. And I was like, I need to go talk to them. So I came over, and we were looking for a part-time tasting room person. And it's like, I could do that. Well, maybe they'll let me top once a week. And so slowly I started in the tasting room, and I think within 2 weeks I was full-time here, helping in the cellar. And I came on as Dan's assistant for the first few years, and kind of helped with both the vineyard and the cellar. And for me, it was it's kind of the dream job that I had been looking for, and that I feel like every time I was in the cellar, I was reaching for the vineyard and wanting to be closer to that. And then when I was just in the vineyard, you drop the grapes off on these doorsteps and think, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to them? I want to see that side too. It's amazing that here in the United States we continue to, I think there's a big separation between the grapes and the winemaking facility. And whether even if it's a state winery, having a vineyard management company farm it, and you not necessarily having control of what's happening out there. So here at Johan, we do all the things together, and I think it really goes a long way in the final product that's produced, to be able to make some moves out in the vineyard, or at least just observe what's happening, so that when the grapes do come in the door, we're able to kind of let them make the best wine that they can, that's reflective of the site in the year.
So going off of that, it sounds like that's sort of the beginning of your winemaking philosophy. But if you could kind of elucidate what your winemaking philosophy is, that would be, I would love to hear that based on the site.
Yeah. So I mean, ideally, the grapes, everything, all the big decisions are made outside. We try to grow grapes that have that achieve full ripeness with the right chemistry coming in the door, that will be able to transform into a wine that is balanced, expressive of the site, not putting anything in between the grapes and the site and the wine. A big thing for us here is native fermentations. So I think to be able to use the native yeast that's available in the vineyard as well as in the winery is one of the biggest things that has to do with the expression of a place. We have never had a cultivated yeast strain here in the cellar at Johan, all native fermentations. And some of them take a little bit of time. The whites can take up to a year, sometimes a little longer. They'll just slowly tick. Sometimes when I talk about that, people think we're totally crazy and like something's wrong. but they'll get there if you just give them the time. And then, continue to taste and just make sure things aren't going off in a weird direction. But yeah, I think native fermentation's one. Ideally, making decisions based on the chemistry that does come in the door. So if there's a year with higher pHs on Pinot Noir, which we do see, maybe use a little bit less whole cluster for the conversion to make a more balanced wine in the end. I think we're just trying to use the tools that we have in terms of listening and guiding rather than manipulating, and just really try to give thanks to the place and the year that was brought to us. That answer winemaking style.
So I'm curious, because you kind of fell for the site before you had seen it. You fell for the fermentation of the grapes. Now that you're here, have you kind of figured out what it is, what it is that makes it special?
I think there's an energy here that isn't explainable. I think a lot of people feel it when they come. We definitely do not have a fancy winery. We have a big square box that we make a very, very simple wine. Our vineyard is kind of bare bones. Like we'd love to get to a point where we have animals and kind of an educational setting to share biodynamic wine growing with people. But right now it's it's a really special place. I think what's cool is that we're continuing to diversify across a lot of different grape varieties, and we're seeing a similarity in the expression in wine, despite the variety. So as we increase the number of white grapes that we're working with, we're seeing commonalities across all of them. Same with reds. We were primarily Pinot Noir. We have some Blaufränkisch that we work with, a few other Austrian reds, some Cab Franc and Gamay that we sell to another fruit buyer. But seeing this site expression across multiple varieties, I think is really intriguing and compelling. In terms of what makes it so special, I think our owner dog, Johan, Sunby, he's one of those amazing people that he's very trusting, and he's allowed a lot of experimentation here on his property to happen that I think a lot of owners would be like, you're totally crazy. That doesn't make any sense. And are you sure that's a financially sound decision? And we were able to try a lot of things both in the vineyard and in the cellar, with him saying yes to a few things that might have been a little bit crazy. But I think just the openness to experimentation has allowed us to explore the opportunities here. So
what is it about biodynamic farming principles that appeals to you?
I think biodynamics is the closest that you can come to a holistic expression of a site. Organics is great, and it's a great starting point. But in reality, it's really just substituting, one chemistry for another. Biodynamics incorporates the entire farm. It's more of I want to say lifestyle, but it's more of a philosophy. We farm the way we do because we feel that this is the best option for this place. We're focusing on not just the expression of the year, but continuing to generate a good ecosystem for things to grow. We focus a lot on soil microbiology and building our soil. And I think through all of these things, biodynamic farming also allows you to listen and observe what's going on and what's needed at any one time. I think that just makes us better wine growers in the end, just being present. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good answer. I like that. Tell me what a typical day looks like for you here, Johan.
Well, recently I've got to hop into a little bit more of the business side of things. We are growing both our production and, like I was mentioning, some of the experimental things we're doing. We're making a number of new wines. We're continuing to graft in new varieties here. So figuring out how to incorporate these new varieties into our kind of lineup and share those with the markets that we're working with. I help out with distribution and sales, as well as bookkeeping and admin things. Honestly, in terms of the cellar here, we top once a week to ensure, we're not doing much in terms of sulfur management. So the biggest thing that we do in the cellar year-round to manage oxidation is to top once a week. But outside of that, just tasting and keeping an eye on where things are at. We're not, until the wine is ready to rack for a bottle, it's just there in barrel. So every day is different here, and I think that's what really keeps things interesting. Clearly there's a lot going on in the vineyard this time of year, and I get to process some POs in the morning and take a walk and then taste some wine and host people that want to come out and visit. And it's, you never know what's going to happen every day. So
pretty awesome.
Yeah.
You talked about sort of the varietals, some of the experimentation and varietals. So tell me a little bit more about that. You're talking about growing and also diversifying. So tell me kind of what you're diversifying into.
We now have 16 different grape varieties growing on this site.
Awesome.
And we function as both a grower and a producer. So we do sell fruit to a number of winery partners here in Oregon. A lot of them being smaller producers that are excited to make a Johan Vineyard designate wine. So we, in terms of what we work with, grape varietal wise for Johan, we have 10 different clonal selections of Pinot Noir. So Pinot has been, at least in the past few years, the first thing we harvest and the last thing we harvest. So a very wide range of harvests for Pinot. One of the longest Pinot harvests, I think, that I've heard of. We are working with a number of Austrian varieties. So we have some Gruner Veltliner and Blaufränkisch, and then Saint Laurent and Zweigelt. And we're really feeling like this site is well suited for those varieties. The Gruner is super expressive and has some similarities to our Chardonnay, but just we make it in a textural kind of more fleshy style. let those skins get nice and ripe. And the wine is really compelling. The Blau, I think, is kind of the current team favorite. It is one that, you know, in comparison to Pinot, it can kind of just sit back and wait for you to get to it. It doesn't ask too much of you, other than having giant leaves and needing some leaf removal and maybe some cluster declumping, but it's just a really mellow and easy thing to grow. And then in the cellar, we do really simple winemaking, destemmed. And recently we've started playing with a little bit of whole cluster on it, but it's wildly expressive, and it has a lot of similarities to our Pinot, but then just like one more kind of dimension of depth in terms of fruit profiles and aromatics. It's really, really interesting, especially in these last few warmer vintages. We're starting to see a bit more fruit development, but it's really nice in cooler vintages too. So, yeah, we have some Sauvignon grafted in, which we're excited to see what that's going to be like. We'll probably get some fruit next year. We're working with some higher acid clonal selections of Chardonnay, which retain acidity at full ripeness, which is really difficult with a lot of the Dijon selections here in the valley. As you start to get closer to kind of ideal ripeness, then you start to lose acidity really quickly. And we're able to maintain that and make Chardonnay with, you know, lots of concentrated fruit flavor, but plenty of acidity and focus. What else are we playing with? We have some Ribolla, Gialla, and Friulano that we did some skin contact on last year, and that's, I thought it was going to be way more weird and out there, and it's just stunning and elegant and floral, and doesn't, to me, it doesn't taste like what I was expecting it to taste like at all. I think it's going to be a really, really nice wine. It's still in barrel. We'll be bottling it in September, but yeah, there's lots of things going on.
How do you go about sort of educating and selling these kinds of wines to consumers that are not familiar with them?
So we share a lot of these here in our tasting room. I think what's really special about our tasting experience is, I mean, there's mainly 4 of us or 5 of us that work here that farm the grapes, make the wine, sell the wine. And we're all involved in the entire process so that we're able to really have that experience with the customer. Again, our tasting room is quaint, and we sit on the patio and just share wine and talk about the vineyard and what happens in the cellar and where these grape varieties originally came from. And kind of, I think we're able to discuss with the customer how they can make that connection to something that they're similar or that they're familiar with, and they're not too far away from something they're familiar with, and say, well, this is this other grape, and you know, this is our take on it, and this is what we've observed this on our site. So I think really just having someone who's involved in the process talk about it. You know, we share a lot of Pinot here too, and the Pinot on this site is really interesting. It's unlike any other Pinot I've tasted in the valley for sure. So, yeah.
Interesting. You talked earlier about the weather and the warm vintages we've had lately, and now your diversification. Is part of that kind of a hedge against future issues with global warming, or do you foresee other people in the Oregon wine industry doing something similar where they start kind of diversifying a bit more?
I would hope so. I think, it's hard to know what our future is going to look like in terms of climate. And in general, though, I feel like we just have a lot of Pinot planted in this valley, and it does really well here. But I think we need to open our, blinders a little bit and see this isn't the only thing that can grow here. With these warmer vintages, even with Pinot Noir, we have a number of selections that retain acidity as we're getting, closer to that ripening point. So even with the blend of the Dijon clones that we have on the property, we're able to bring in some other clonal selections that maybe will create balance in a blend. I think just, I don't know, to have all your eggs in one basket in anything is just not super safe. But yeah, I think the diversity also keeps us as wine growers interested. It's really fun to see these new things come about, and we're all really jazzed to work with Pinot every year too. But it's really exciting when the first Zweigelt comes in the door, and like, what are we going to do with this? So yeah, maybe it's a site for nerdy wine growers too, but yeah, I think though with these warmer vintages, it is smart to hedge your bets a bit. Yeah.
Since you're fairly new to the industry, you're looking at perhaps a fairly long career ahead of you in it. What do you see for Johan and yourself as you look, say, 10 years into the future? What are you seeing coming down the road?
I think that we have a lot to share. So we've been really focused on kind of internal growth here, and the exploration amongst our team and the site. We've put together a really exciting team. Two of our full-time staff right now were both interns with us in the last few years, and they just both have super different skill sets, and one now runs our DTC and wine club here, even though he has a lot of experience in winemaking and vineyards, and then the other is kind of split between the vineyard and the cellar. We're just compiling a team that I think will allow us to build our offerings here. So we're, doing a lot of interesting things out in the vineyard, growing the Biodynamic program, and I hope at one point we'll be able to have some animals on this site. We'll have a little bit, I don't think we ever strive to have a big hospitality program, but I think just a place to share our kind of approach to this agricultural system that we're creating. People find it really interesting, and I hope we're able to maintain, this small feeling, and take a walk in the vineyard and talk about what's happening out there, and then taste the wines from it with some animals. And yeah, we have a lot of land here to share, so that's definitely a goal.
What about as you look into the future for the industry in general? You mentioned the community of it, and obviously the rapid growth lately. What do you see as you look a decade ahead for Oregon wine?
I'm really excited. I think, a lot of us here have done a ton to position ourselves to share with the country and the world that we can make quality wine from really diverse sites across a number of different grape varieties. And I think we have some good, organizations behind us, like the Oregon Wine Board and the Willamette Valley Wineries Association are doing a lot to help kind of organize all of us crazy winemakers and take our stories out there. I hope that with the growth that we're seeing and the investment that we're seeing, we're able to maintain this special kind of small industry feel. And I think we will. I think the people that have been, called to work in Oregon in this industry are all really special humans. And I think that we're in a good place to continue to have that kind of community vibe, an open book to share. But I think that more eyes on us will just allow us to continue to sell more wine and share our stories.
Are there particular obstacles or challenges that you're kind of keeping your eyes open for as you look ahead?
That's a good question. Obstacles or challenges. I think, as with anything, the more eyes you have on you and the more Pinot Noir that's going in the ground, just makes you need to be relevant and stay relevant. How to offer a product at the right price point with increasing farming costs, labor costs, and stay competitive in the industry is really going to be interesting. There's a few people predicting a crash in the coming years, and I think that whether that happens or not, I think people that are diversified across their offerings and then continue to focus on quality will surface as the ones that will be able to maintain growth. I think we grew a lot, and then some people are feeling the need to stay at that size. So I hope that we're able to continue to grow all together. And
You talked earlier about coming in as an intern and looking for a spot and feeling sympathy towards people who are doing that now. So what advice would you have for someone who wanted to enter the industry today?
I would definitely get yourself in front of someone. It's really hard to send, I feel like the first couple, I just sent these long love letters of why I wanted to work at this place. And I know that when we look for our interns, it's really hard to read those really long love letters, but I get so excited about it. I think just positioning yourself as a really hard worker and explaining your passion and desire to learn is important. Mentioning that you're organized and can wear multiple hats and really like to clean things those are all great things to mention. I remember mentioning at one point I love cleaning drains, and they were like, okay, you're hired. But yeah, I think we have an intern coming on with us who's never worked in the industry, and she doesn't have a degree. She also came from the service side of things, and she sounds like a really hard worker, and I'm really excited to have the opportunity to share what we have going here. And then I hope to continue to be able to offer opportunities like that. And it's amazing how much we gain from having a fresh set of eyes, and especially those eyes that haven't necessarily done this all the time, asking those questions of, well, why do you do this way? and you actually have to think about it more than just, well, we've always done it like that. And you have to explain, well, this is because, well, I don't really know. Do you have a better idea? So, I think it's important for all of us in the industry to continue to offer experiences like this to people wanting to learn. Whether it's an internship or, having those servers down from your top selling restaurant in Portland to help sort fruit for a day. It's like, people love to sort fruit. And when you do it, for hours on end during harvest, it's like, it's great. But yeah.
What's something about being a winemaker that caught you totally off guard? What was something you were not expecting about the job of being a wine grower, winemaker that caught you by surprise?
I think that as with anything, any industry, the closer you come to that idea, I want to be a winemaker, and I'm going to work towards being a winemaker. And now that I am, I do a lot of office work. So I guess I didn't really expect that. But it's really important to collect your data, keep your data. It's beneficial to both you and, I hope, for multiple generations to come. I think to have that information to share is really, really helpful. Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
You guys have anything? That's all the questions that I have prepared for you. Is there anything that I should have asked? Anything we should have talked about that we didn't cover?
I don't think so. I think we covered lots of things, but I guess I would say too, we're just at the beginning of, I feel like our industry is still so young, and there will be a lot of changes, and I think it's really amazing what you're doing to kind of get some of these stories on paper now, and then be cool to come back and revisit and see where people are at in 5 or 10 years. And thank you for what you're up to.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us and giving us your time and your thoughts today and your story, and we'll let you off the hook.
Thanks.